Okay, so for this lesson, we will be talking about random sampling. Okay, so mhm. So at the end of this, you are expected to just simply illustrate a random sampling. Right. So before we proceed on that, let me guys uh, mm, ask you: have you ever wondered, like, since COVID-19 pandemic, vaccine is very in demand, right? So before creating a vaccine took a year, or when I can still if I still remember it right, during the time of Isaac Newton, the plug, there was that pandemic, they call it the plug. So I think the vaccine took around 5 years to be created, but now it only took us like 6 months. Basta, less than a year, just like that. Now, so the vaccine, before all people in the world use the vaccine, of course, it is being tested on some people first. No? So we don't want to risk anyone. Okay, so that's why we have, they call, testing. Now, have you ever asked yourself, paano kaya tinitest yung vaccine? No? Paano pinipili yung sample or yung mga magte-test ng vaccine? Okay. So that's where the statistics came in. Okay. So gumagamit sila ng yung mga researchers, para ma-determine kung sino yung possible sample, I mean yung posibleng turukan muna, yung magiging sample. Gumagamit din sila ng para malaman yung efficacy. No? As of now, efficacy is a big issue in terms of our vaccine. That's why maraming may ayaw ng Sinovac because of its 50% efficacy. Maybe imagine 50%, that's one half, right? So meaning 50% lang yung chance na what? Tatalab yung vaccine? Or, okay? So statistics dyan siya ginagamit. Okay? So a population consists of all members. Okay. So here, just want to highlight the word population. Okay. So we're talking about population, right? So when you say population, consists of all members of the group with common characteristics. All right. So a population is a group that has a common characteristics. Okay. That is the focus of a research and where the sample is thrown. So in Tagalog, si population group siya, no? Group siya na meron silang pare-parehong characteristics. Let's say population ng tao, ng hayop, yung mga population ng hayop, pare-pareho silang hayop. Or population ng halaman, pare-pareho silang halaman. Okay? Now, sa population, that is where we uh, get the sample. So, si sample, from the word itself, sample, sila yung ating sample. Okay? So, what is a sample? A sample is a portion. Okay? A portion. It makes sense. Population, dumuko ni si sample. Therefore, si sample, portion lang siya. Okay? Portion or part, or let's say subset in mathematical terms, subset of the entire population. Okay? Now, when we say sampling, okay, sampling is a procedure in selecting the sample from the population. So, si sampling, siya yung way or yung mm, step para kumuha ng sample doon sa population. Hindi naman pwedeng pag gusto mo siya, siya na yon sample mo, di ba? O ikaw, gusto ko nang tarukan ng bakuna, ikaw na. Hindi ganon. No? So there is a proper way for that. And we call that sampling. Okay? It's a procedure in selecting the sample from the population. Let me highlight the sampling first. To give the N. Alright? So this is usually done when the population is too large for gathering the data. Isipin mo, magte-test ka ng vaccine. Now, Syempre, lahat gagamit ng vaccine. Hindi mo naman pwedeng gawing population lahat. I mean, hindi mo pwedeng gawing sample lahat ng tao. No? Kasi pag may mali sa vaccine mo, hindi nagkandamatay. That's why tinitest siya sa sample. Now, ginagamit siya kapag si sampling, we use that when the population is too large, of course. Um, it's effectively selecting a sample is essential when a researcher wishes to achieve unbiased result in his or her study. One of the best ways to fulfill is by using a random sampling. So this is our focus, our random sampling. Okay? Isa yan. That's why we are doing sampling is because to lessen the bias. Okay? To lessen the bias. Alright? Now, here's an illustration of population in a sample. Imagine this whole rectangle is the population. Nandiyan daw yung population mo. And then, sample is in here. So you can see, nasa loob siya ng population, part lang siya ng population. So imaginein mo, look, you are studying agriculture, let's say. So itong rectangle na yan, 100 hectares. Imagine kung gaano kalaki yung 100 hectares. Iti-test mo yung 100 hectares na yun. Baka patay ka na, hindi ka pa tapos mag-test. No? That's why researchers gumagamit lang sila ng sample. They just simply pick a portion of the land, assuming that you're studying agriculture, you will just pick a portion of the land and then yun yung magiging sample mo. Whatever data that you get from this sample will represent the whole population. Okay? Okay, so there are types of random sampling. Alright? So simple random sampling. So it is the most basic sampling technique. In this sampling technique, every member of the population has an equal chance. Meaning, it doesn't matter kahit sino pa yan, meron siyang chance na mapili as a sample. No? One way to do simple random sampling is by using the table of random numbers or by using the lottery method. Now, lottery method, if you're familiar with lottery, lotto, may mga bola sa loob and then lumalabas yung what do you call that? The ball, di ba? That's doon na determine kung ano yung winning numbers. Okay, we also call this the fishbowl method as well. So let me add that. Fishbowl method. Mm, I'm very sure that you already encountered this, the fishbowl. No? Usually, we do fishbowl method kapag nag-exchange gifts. No? Exchange gift kayo, hulog kayo ng mga names doon, bubunutin yung monito-monito ba yan? Okay. Kung ano man yung tawag doon. Basta yung binubunot siya, syempre, unbiased yun. I mean, not biased because you are not able to see, no, kung sino yung mabubunot mo. Random yun eh. Right? So, fishbowl method. Now, example of the random sampling is this. A researcher wants to study the number of hours spent by an adult in doing household chores over the weekend in a certain community. In selecting members of his sample, he wanted to use the simple random sampling technique. If there are 800 adults in the community, how many adults should there be in this sample? Oh, okay. So, imaginein mo kung lahat yung 800 adults tatanungin mo. It will take you, not impossible though, but it will take you a very long time. Okay? Now, the question here is how many adults should there be in this sample? Now, to determine how many, you can use the formula Slovene. No? Slovene formula. But I will not be discussing the Slovene formula here. Okay? I just want to show you how the random sampling technique works. Say you have an 800 adult. You can just simply assign, let's say, si adult 1, adult 1 is number 1, adult 2 is number 2, adult 3 is number 3, and so on until you reach adult 800. That adult 800 represents the number 800. Alright? And then after that, you write that on a piece of paper until 800. Of course, that's too many. I do not advise to write it, but rather to print it. And then cut it. Then put it on the... Sorry, this is just a step 3. cut it and then put it on a bowl. Just like, that's why they called it a fishbowl method. Of course, an empty bowl, no? Wag yung bowl na may isda. That's stupid. Alright. And then after that, for the step 4, now, in using the Slovene, you will get this 267. Therefore, you need 267 sample. Alright? Mm, 267 sample. Now, since you already have the paper inside the bowl, all you have to do is to pick 267 pieces. Nilista mo kung sino yung nakuha mo. Let's say nakuha mo si number 3. Therefore, that's adult number 3. Isa siya sa sample mo. Then another, you got adult number 150. Therefore, adult 150 is one of your sample as well until you have a total of 267 sample. Okay? Alright? So that's for the simple random technique. Next, let's have a systematic sampling. Now, a random sampling, it is a random sampling technique in which every kth element of the population is selected. Until the desired number of elements in the sample is obtained, the value k is the sampling interval. So, when you say interval, pagitan siya, no? So, just simply remember this formula, k is equal to n over n, capital N over n. So, ano yung capital N? Capital N is the population size, kung gaano daw kalaki yung population mo, okay? N is your sample size. Kung gaano daw kalaki yung iyong sample size. Okay? Number of elements in sample. Now, si K, siya yung iyong interval. Siya yung pagitan. Let's say we have this. So, there are 400 families in a barangay in which 50 families are needed as a sample for an experiment. See? So, 400 families, we only need 50. Okay? So, N, capital N, is 400. Let me put that here. And the small n, which is a sample, is 50. So 400 divided 50 is... Okay. So step 1, prepare the sample frame by randomly arranging the 400 families. So usually, you can ask a list. If you will do this, you can ask a list from the barangay, ask them, or ask the officer of the barangay if they can provide a list for you because you are doing some research. No? Now, assign each family a number from 1 to 400 since you don't know them. Okay. Usually, may numbering naman pag binigay. No? Parang listahan sa SAP. Ganun, may numbering siya. So, hindi mo na kailangan numberan. Okay, find the sampling interval K. So, that's 8 sample intervals. So, meaning, yung pang number 8, siya yung kukunin mong una. And then, dagdagan mo ulit ng 8, number 16, siya yung pangalawa. Okay? So, select the number of whole numbers, 0 and k plus 1, simple random technique. The numbers that are between 0 and k plus 1 are 1 to 8. So, saan nanggaling si k? So, 8, anong value ng k? That's 8, right? So, add 1, that's 9. So, yung numbers between 0 and 9 are 1 to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, therefore, dyan ka pipili ng iyong random start. Okay? Pili ka ng random start mo dyan. Now, let's say, ang random start mo ay 3. Or pwede rin namang, say, ang random start mo ay 8. Just like what I have said earlier. It depends on you. Okay? Let's say you chose a random start of 3. So, we will use 3 as the starting number. By the way, in random start, you are the one who decide what the random start number is. Okay? So in this case, let's say we start with the 3. So the family on the number 3 is our first sample. And then let's add 8 since that's our interval. So 3 plus 8. See? Select every 8 families from the sampling frame, starting from the third families. Okay. Therefore, the numbers of the sample will be, since we started with 3 plus 8, 11 plus 8 again, 19 plus 8 again is 27, and until you reach the end part, or until you got 50 families, since 50 is the required sample. Okay. So another type of random sampling is stratified sampling. So in stratified, the population is partitioned. When you say partition, hinati-hati. Alright? Partition. Yan yung keyword niya. Into several subgroups called strata. Hinati-hati siya sa subgroup. Parang, hmm, how do I represent partition? Parang sa school, ginroupings kayo. Okay? Ginroupings. So bawat group, they call that strata. No? We call strata, which are based on some characteristics like here level, gender, age, ethnicity, etc. Okay? So let's say, example, let's say we have a clothing company who wants to determine whether 1,000 customers prefer any specific color over other colors in shirts. How many are going to choose your sample of 200 customers by using stratified sampling? If there are 144, 162, 73, 146, 207, and 205 customers per stratum. Now, as you can see, there are a total of 1,000, right? So, the clothing company divided the 1,000 into this. So, when you add that, the result would be 1,000. Okay? Now, subdivide the population with their preferred shirts color into several strata, then make a table. So, let's say a total of population again is 1,000. Okay? So there are 144 who said that they like white. 162 said that they like blue, and so on and so forth. And then 205 who said that they love green. Okay. Now to obtain the sample size per color, that's a question there. Ngayon, sir, alam na natin yan. Ilan po yung kukunin natin dun sa white? No? Ilan sa blue? Tigsa 10 lang po ba? Ganun? No, there is a proper way to get that. Okay? Now, to obtain the sample size per color, divide the total number of customers per stratum by the total number of customers. Okay? And then multiply the result by 200. Select the members of each sample by using the simple random sampling. So, computation, say, for white, we have 144 who said that they love white, divided by 1,000, multiplied by 200. Therefore, we will get 29 customers for white shirt. Now, depends on you on how would you pick the 29 customers. No? You can do, or you can use random sampling technique in picking that 29 customers. Okay? Okay, so here is the complete table for that. Right? Okay? So, why did we multiply it in 200? Because our desired sample is 200. And remember the formula, number in strata divided by the total sample or the population times the desired sample. Okay, next is the random sampling. Next type of random sampling is cluster or area sampling. So the population is divided into clusters. Okay. For these clusters, the random sample cluster will be thrown. All the elements from the sample cluster will make up the sample. So earlier, para siyang stratified. Kaya lang here, we use the term cluster. Okay? So how do we represent the cluster? So here's the illustration of the cluster. So imagine this is the whole, let's say, population. So we divided it into clusters, section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, and section 5. Okay? So suppose some medical researchers want to study the patients in Metro Manila. How are they going to do this using the cluster sampling technique? So how? First, divide the population into cluster, just like what we did here. We divided it into five sections. And then, um, no, not all the hospital in Metro Manila will be included in the sample. This could be selected at simple random sampling. Okay? Now, unlike the stratified, every strata, we get a sample for every strata. Now, in cluster, we do not do that. Okay? Let's say we already clustered this population. Now, it's not required to get a sample from section 2, section 4, and section 5 as this illustration illustrates. See, this illustration only took a sample from section 1 and section 3. Okay, so not all patients in the chosen hospital will be included in the study. Select the final patient to be included in sample by using simple random. Now, let's say, okay, so sir, I decided to use the section 1 and section 3 because of my specific reason. No, sir, how do I choose the sample from this section and from this section? In choosing sample from those sections, you can use simple random sampling. Okay? Now, as if you will notice, simple random sampling is always used because that is the most unbiased way of choosing a sample. Kasi wala kang idea kung sino yung makukuha mo. Fishbowl method siya, no? Nandun sila lahat, hindi mo alam kung sino yung sample yung mahuhugot mo. Okay? So that's how you do the cluster. Okay? Alright, so I have here an activity. Oh. So in activity, I will just want you to identify the following examples as a population sample. As population or sample. So all you have to do is to tell if it is population or sample. Okay? For activity 1.2, classify each sample as simple random sampling, stratified random, systematic, or cluster. Okay? So all you have to do is to tell if it is simple random, stratified, cluster, or systematic. And also check your understanding. Answer the check your answer understanding on the module that I sent in our group chat. Then upload the pictures of your answers in our GC. Again, if you have question, kindly post it in our conversation. I will answer that as soon as possible. Okay?